As you can see, I'm going to talk on my paper is Rhetorics of Hate, Antisémitisme, de plume, and Letters of Denunciation during Vichy. Pétain was the shield and de Gaulle was the sword was a commonplace post-war narrative that implied that Vichy, in a veiled way, protected French Jews during the German occupation. This once widely held belief has long been dismantled through the work of various historians, most importantly Robert Paxton and Michael Maris. A haunting collection of letters of denunciation against Jews, housed in the archives of the Mémorial de la Shoah in Paris, reinforces the falsity of this original myth by depicting how ordinary French citizens contributed to Jewish marginalization and ultimate deportation through the dissemination of toxic stereotypes in line with what André Targiev calls Antisémitisme de plume. I explore how these letters partake in the tradition of anti-Semitic literary themes, tropes, and devices, quite popular in France since the 19th century, underscoring the place of literary cultural production, cartoons, novels, treatises, newspaper articles, in the making of the collaborator. This archival work perhaps becomes more relevant due to the resurgence of revisionist historiographies that attempt to rehabilitate Vichy. For example, in Cécile Despary's work, L'Héritage de Vichy, 100 Measures Still in Force, Vichy is recuperated by extolling its accomplishments of social benefits, modernizing programs, and laws that still permeate France's current legislative apparatus. Or, as in Eric Zemmour's xenophobic bestseller, Le Suicide Français, that could be called Making France Great Again, his critique of the social, political, and economic multicultural policies in France harkens to a nostalgic nativistic view of the French state with its traditional patriarchal Christian values of family and nation, reasserting the myth that Vichy endeavored to save French Jews by sacrificing foreign ones. During Vichy, all of France functioned, in Maurice Rachrous's words, as a concentrationary universe where denunciation was an important, if not essential practice of the regime. The law of October 1941 mandated that citizens denounce all illegal activity, and denunciation was encouraged both in official newspapers and on Radio Vichy and Radio Paris that reached an audience of at least 5 million listeners. This practice had great success because it engaged the public, making everyone feel part of a larger project and giving ordinary citizens a sense of agency because they felt they had become bureaucrats, petits fonctionnaires of Vichy. There was such a large barrage against all sectors under surveillance, inundating government offices, that Pétain himself discouraged false denunciations. However, slanderous and anonymous letters against Jews were still vigorously investigated. I examined the collection of 126 letters of the Mémorial, viewing them both as corpus and individual textual artifacts, each one a unique lieu de mémoire, or in other words, site of memory. Theorization of these denunciatory documents required a two-pronged approach. The first perspective was derived from their juridical aspect that originates from the body of legislation in Vichy, the most notorious being the Statut des Juifs. These laws provided the legal and moral justification for informers and gave impetus to their epistolary endeavor. The second perspective is an ideological, discursive one. This two-pronged approach structures an epistemology of denunciation, the letters becoming its material footprint, from which I developed a taxonomy for the collection. I proposed the following discursive categories: the discourse of otherness, of illegality, of propaganda, and civic engagement, presenting itself often as didactic or pedagogical suggestions to the authorities as to how to eliminate Jews more efficiently, and finally, three salient affective discourses, which include inverted victimhood, that is, blaming the Jews for the woes of the French due to the war where Jews were primary victims, envy, the desire for the possessions of Jews to the point of taking everything away from them without any personal gain, and vengeance, retribution for perceived wrong. Targiev establishes two distinct categories that underpin themes that pervade anti-Semitic cultural production in general. First, Jewish inability to assimilate, and second, the conspiracy of Jewish world domination. These categories hold true in this collection of letters, encompassing themes such as usury, greed, and vulgarity of Jewish excess, foreignness and invasion of French spaces, infestation and exploitation of the real French, involvement in the black market, the sexual pervert, the resort communist and Freemason Jew with a defective moral and ethical system, Jew as tribal at the exclusion of others, and Jewish non-belonging as Jews were considered guests in France despite being part of the country for generations. This lexicon set up the contrast between the author's expressed Frenchness, je suis 100% français, and the outsider, between Aryan and Jew. The Jewish problem is addressed in these letters through motifs of elimination or objection, Aryanization, expropriation, which was called spoliation, cleansing, nettoyage, moral healing, assainissement, and purification, épuration. Linguistically, the letters contain derogatory epithets against Jews, such as metek, vermine, rapace, gros, gras, néfaste, and, of course, Dupin, kike, fitting into what Zadine Sanos calls the aesthetics of hate. Epistolary denunciators were extremely diverse in terms of social milieu and occupation. Many were members of unions, guilds, and veterans groups, as well as from the impoverished, unemployed, to the very established wealthy individuals and professionals. Letters originated from both urban and rural centers in France and from its North African colonies. By examining these letters, not as mere historical documents, but through the lens of theoretical and literary tools such as deconstruction, psychoanalysis, feminist and queer theory, trauma theory, and theories of alterity and colonialism and post-colonialism, these documents render provocative readings that shed light on the zeitgeist of Vichy France, its propaganda machine, and popular anti-Semitic trends. Now I will read the analysis of a letter written in 1943 by a certain Captain Roche from Nice, addressed directly to Darquier de Pellepoix, the notorious director of the General Commission on Jewish Affairs. I titled this letter Producing Films in Nice, and it is representative of a discourse of envy. I think if you've looked at the printout, if you got a, it's terrible, I'm so nervous. I can't go down here. For those of you that, this is what the facsimile of the original letter in the archives looks like. And of course it's difficult to read, so it took time to do a polyography of both handwritten letters and letters that had been typed as well. And then, so that's a picture of the letter, and then it's transcribed there, and then I also have a summary if you want to read that. Okay. So, I propose that this letter stems from libidinal frustration and dissatisfaction. One can get a sense of the sexually charged lexicon from the very first sentence. J'entends régulièrement votre émission concernant les questions juives. Malheureusement, elles sont purement théoriques. I regularly listen to your radio broadcasts concerning Jewish issues. Unfortunately, they are merely theoretical exercises. The word émission, beyond its use in telecommunications in French, can refer as well to ejaculation. From the letter, one can infer that the author unconsciously perceives the government as castrated, since their émissions do not deliver any of their rhetorical promises. In this sense, the word logos, originally equated with male potency in a Derridian sense, phallologocentrism, does not bear its fruit, and the author complains that the government's attempts are both infertile and impotent. The subordinate phrase, concerning Jewish questions, is also a key to this sexual dynamic, since Jews are the fetishistic objects of desire or repulsion that provoke the ineffectual transmissions. A counterpoint to the impotent French government is Fina Kopelevich, the Polish Jew the author denounces. Despite having been expelled from France in 1933, the author utilizes the word refoulé for expulsion with the parallel meaning of sexual repression. Kopelevich managed to escape a stalag and re-enters France, becoming the commercial director of cinema studios. In this sense, his homecoming after an expulsion, repression, could be understood as the return of the repressed, and the author is both intimidated and alarmed by his presence. From a Freudian standpoint, the author's psyche presents Kopelovich as sexually charged. Phonetically, his name is evocative of copulation, copule. His job at the cinema denotes not only financial plenty, 8,000 to 10,000 francs a month, but social power and access to realm of fantasy, since movies create and engage desire. Cinemas are also dark spaces where the imagination takes hold, a metaphor for both the unconscious and the sexual. Kopelovich is able to regularly have access to this forbidden realm that Jews ought not to penetrate, quand juif ne doit y pénétrer. The author cannot penetrate this space and envies everything it symbolizes, from satisfying sexuality to financial abundance. Kopelovich has a wife who was involved in trafficking gold, historically associated with conspiracies of Jewish financial power. But also gold has been an erotic marker of desire, beauty, and pleasure. In addition, she and her husband are purported to be involved in the black market and shady dealings on the stock market, des affaires louches. This work connoting vice, debauchery, and secrecy, again peripherally linked with anti-Semitic stereotypes of Jewish promiscuity and sexual perversity. Moreover, Kopelevich's private domestic space is also denoted as the desired location of abundant financial and sexual resources and energy. Il a chez lui de grandes réserves. In contrast, the author of the letter complains that the good French Catholics like himself are incapable of obtaining these privileges, putting the blame on the Jews who occupy valuable French spaces. The author unconsciously associates his standing as a good Catholic and a solid Frenchman with the incapacity or inability of obtaining the goods he desires: money, sexuality, and access to dark spaces of erotic fantasy and pleasure. He resents and envies the ease with which Kopelovich enters this realm that he himself does not have access to. Again, frustration can be inferred by the statement that his initial complaint, a first letter, was ignored by the CJQJ office in Nice. His words as expression of his virility also failed to deliver, and now he writes directly to the paternal figure, the High Commissioner of the CJQJ, Darquier de Pellepoix. However, I propose that perhaps for the author, Kopelovich is an alternative paternal figure that he dreads, just like Kafka in Letter to His Father. He insists that his missive remain confidential and does not include his address for fear of retaliation emasculation. The magnification of Kopelevich's power, ce juif a des ramifications partout, a power that effaces the author's own identity, could be understood as a severe paranoid fear of castration. Captain Roche requests that the High Commissioner inform him of the receipt of this letter by radio broadcast that he listens to regularly. Along with the Freudian register of libidinal desire and frustration, one can superimpose a Girardian register onto this reading. The elements of Girard's schema of triangular desire are visibly present in the text. The subject of desire, Captain Roche, is the denunciator. His rival is Kopelovich, and the objects of desire are his rival's sexual activities, money, job, and social position. He defends himself from his own envious desire through the violent act of denunciation, justifying his aggression by rationalizing that Jews were taking away jobs from good Catholic French and that Kopelovich was committing a national crime by breaking the Vichy laws. In the poetics of the epistolary language, the idealization of Kopelovich is expressed in the description of his sexual prowess and resilience. We can recognize Girard's position that envious desire is so threatening that the subject needs to hide from his own feelings of admiration for the rival. Since Captain Roche is inevitably comparing himself with Kopelovich, he projects his own feelings of inferiority by devaluing and attacking his rival, and finally denouncing him to the authorities.
Okay. Thank you very much.
В принципе, как
психолог, он исследовал взаимодействие катастрофы на личность. И его способ исследования, он хотел смотреть на руинирование речи. Ему казалось, что у него были разные группы, разные по степени страдания в Холокосте, и он смотрел, у него было очень мощное такое построенное исследование. Дело в том, что он пытался в рамках той школы, к которой он принадлежал, прийти к некоторой пропорции, к некоторой формуле, и это у него не получилось, и как-то вот... Но, в принципе, он хотел исследовать речь и взаимосвязь речи и сознания. Поэтому ему вот все нюансы речи были совершенно принципиально важны.
Травматический эффект событий на людей, как это влияет на язык, речь.
О том, что многие из этих людей там годами не видели печатного слова, не имели возможности говорить на родном языке. Там, допустим, многие свидетели говорят, что они могут говорить из образованных по-английски или по-немецки. Но он очень настаивает на том, чтобы они говорили на родных языках, на тех языках, на которых они, скажем, говорили в гетто. То есть вот такая аутентичность совершенно для него принципиальна.
Вы считаете, что это связано именно с его профессиональной подготовкой, да?
С идеей вот автономии звука слова, да, что...
Насколько вообще психологи, вы знаете, насколько вообще психологи вот первые годы вообще занимались этим? Мы знаем, это 90-е, 2000-е год такой массовый поток, да, даже раньше начинается. Когда начинается для него, насколько он опережал?
Он начинается, когда появляются первые беженцы из Германии, еще до начала Второй мировой войны. Дело в том, что была группа психологов, вот, допустим, при Ельском университете, которая примкнула к антропологам, да, это было движение «Личность и культура», которая рассматривала формирование личности как вхождение в культуру. Естественно, катастрофа, которая уничтожает культуру, что происходит с личностью? Когда первые еврейские беженцы попадают в Америку, то вот Доллард пишет огромный вопросник, вот questionnaire, и они еще были все на фрейдистской позиции, стояли психологически, они были фрейдистами, и пытаются исследовать вот эти свидетельства, что произошло с их личностями. Вот, но в общем-то эти люди, ведь их культурная ситуация, их никакой личной опасности в это время для них не было. И он пришел к выводу, что они там пассивные люди, в общем, что ничего не произошло. Бодер хотел, на самом деле, к тому моменту, как он уже начал свой проект, произошла бомбардировка Хиросимы. И он хотел исследовать разные катастрофы, вот такую глобальную природную катастрофу и глобальную культурную катастрофу, и смотреть, что происходит с людьми. В одном случае исчезает культура, в другом случае исчезает environment, да? И что происходит с языком, и что происходит с людьми. Он умер во второй части, если он поехал на наводнение в Канзасе, пытаясь, это была небольшая такая природная катастрофа, и умер от сердечного приступа. В общем, это был такой очень грандиозный проект.
Спасибо. И у меня последний вопрос. У меня вопрос к Каре. Кара, у меня такой вопрос. Вот понятно, что когда мы говорим о свидетельствах, связанных с доносительством, мы имеем некую выборку, которая тем или иным способом осела в архиве. Очевидно, что значительная часть, поскольку это работает бюрократия, то тех писем, которые пришли, да, они какая-то часть осела. И для нас всегда, в общем-то, для историков остается вопрос о репрезентативности, да, этого всего. Как вы думаете, насколько вот то, что вы видели, то, что вы видите, вообще по суждениям, по взглядам, которые там, насколько это репрезентативно?
Is it representative in general, or the documents are lost?
Is this representative of what the general population, or is it representative of documents that are left? Or the general population? Yes, and I mean they're purported to be from anywhere, the 25,000 extant letters, and Andrea Limi's work says that there was close to perhaps 3 million letters written. So not everyone felt like that, but many people did. I mean, it's hard to put a percentage of the population. You know, you're asking, was all of France anti-Semitic at that point? Did all of France want to put Jews, isolate and discriminate against Jews and ultimately see them deported? I mean, that's a big question. You know, many did, but then again, 75% of Jews in France during La Shoah survived. Now, not necessarily because of the French, but because of Jewish and international rescue committees and organizations, and this. But many French people did help. So it's hard to put a number on that. There was widespread anti-Semitism, or the view of Jews was very negative until Veldiv in the summer of '42, and when they saw, just the average person saw children first being taken away from their parents. Well, you know, first you have the roundup of Veldiv. When they see that, and everybody's shoved into a bicycle stadium, and then they're sent away to camps, and then they see trains leaving with children, and then, you know, mothers. They said something's not right here. They didn't know exactly, but the public opinion did start to change after the summer, during and then after the summer of '42, where it was like, okay, we may not like Jews, but is this right, what's happening? You know, maybe an analogy which may or may not hold, it's like in the United States at this point, with Trump coming into power, and then this immigration is terrible, this Mexican immigration, Islamic immigration, all of this. But when the first time that the American public saw children being taken away from their families, especially the mothers, all of a sudden public opinion has started to change. Not enough, but there's been somewhat of a stepping back and saying, wait, what are we doing here? And I think that something like that, it has its own particularities, started to happen in the summer of '42, which is, wait, there are these laws, and these laws are the state laws. We have to abide by them. But what's really happening here? And so I think that I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay. No, and I understand that нет прямого ответа на этот сложный вопрос. Да? Я понимаю, просто интересно, как во Франции, да, ситуация развивалась, и понятно, что мы точной статистики быть не может и не ожидается. Да? Просто какие-то общие оценки. Спасибо. Да. Еще вопрос у нас есть.
I also have a question first for Kara, and then I would like to come back to Yulia, but we can also divide it into two questions. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm not a historian, I'm dealing with philology, with Russian philology, and so it was really interesting for me how you read these letters. And I know French, I wouldn't have thought about that Kopylevich, it has the notion of copyler, right. So it's really interesting what you filtered out from this. I have a little question concerning the letter you presented. Was there any answer to is there any has there been any research?
There's no record anywhere that states that Kopylevich states, oh, I received a response on, I heard a response that he received it. No, no, we just have the letter. We don't have any, the other side of it.
Because there's something written also on it.
No, these letters have been so, that's probably from another researcher. Or when it came to the archive and the memorial that I show up, that if people looked through it, they categorized it, these, you know, they're in these boxes numbered in the archives.
Okay. And the second the real question is you showed us the rhetorics of desire of the person who wrote this letter. If you take the letters you have analyzed, can you say something about this moment of gender? Were there also letters written by women? And what topics did they write about, or was there any female
yes,
letters?
There were. I mean, so you're asking, were there women who wrote letters of denunciation?
Of denunciation.
Yes, and at first, one of the main ideas or notion of writing letters of denunciation, they thought this was women were writing this because women like to gossip and they're gossiping about their neighbors. And then they realized that it was really something different. And women did write, but more men wrote. And they might write, they might write much of what men wrote. I saw Madame Cohen left her house without her Jewish star affixed on her jacket. Or I saw Madame Schwartz's daughter was giving lessons at home, and they weren't, and Jews were not allowed to teach on any level. They're supposed to be out of that sector. So they wrote much in the same way. There wasn't anything from the letters that I wrote from that collection. Maybe there were at most 10 letters written by women out of the 126. So the greater percentage in this collection were written by men. So that debunked the notion that this kind of epistolary denunciation was a form of female gossip, which it really wasn't. So I don't know if that answers your question. Okay, I didn't see anything. I looked for that in the collection that I had. Was there a special, gendered, or female in a sense? Are they writing something different? But a lot of men. On the other hand, there were letters written by men saying that this Jewish man has stolen my wife. So they had this kind of jealousy over the wife that they owned. Well, now why does this Jew have my wife? And I want him denounced. I want him taken to a camp so my wife cannot enjoy him, so I can have her back. You had these kinds of letters written by men. But I'm sure that there is an analysis that addresses that, but I didn't come across it in this collection, so I didn't quite go in that direction.
Thank you. But it's interesting because in the men's case it's a question of appropriation, and in the female case it's only denunciation.
Right.
It's interesting.
Women can't appropriate. They didn't own them.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Можно мне продолжать? У меня еще вопрос к тебе, Юля, потому что это было очень сильно видеть, сколько веса имеет речь, живое слово, слово высказанное, а потом это все переходит в печать. И у меня вопрос такой, там Бодар, ему было так важно уловить, как люди говорят на их языке. И есть ли какие-то сведения, думали ли о том, как это передается читателю? Это же он меняет медиум, и люди, они потом это читают. Он подумал о том, что, может быть, это надо или стоит читать это, то есть опять переводить это из сказанного в сказанное, живую речь переводить в живую речь. А тут это напечатано, и кто-то это читает.
Да, и что?
И ну, там вот этот момент, что он хотел это живое сохранить, это есть слово в книге, но это можно читать вслух, это можно переносить на сцену, это можно читать в оригинале, в переводе, это как-то имело для него это значение, что будет дальше с этим живым словом.
Знаешь, вот прямо об этом он нигде не пишет, во всяком случае я не видела. И, в общем, наверное, мой ответ я не знаю. Я понимаю, что ты имеешь в виду всякий экспериментальный театр того времени, и русский в том числе, да, но я не знаю. И, конечно, как фрейдист, он мог предвидеть вот такой театр прямой передачи эмоций. Это я просто не знаю, мне не попадалось никаких его мыслей на этот счет.
I have a question, for Yulia as well. Your talk was fantastic, and I'm very interested in trauma theory and testimony and theories of that sort. And it seems to me when you go to you look for a bibliography in trauma theory and testimony, you come up with names like Dominique Lacapra, Dorothy Lobb, Kathy Caruth, and so forth and so on. And I've never seen David Boder, and it seems to me that he really is like at least a precursor or a foundational for this. And then you have the psychologist, psychoanalyst, psychiatrist Robert Lifton. Are you familiar with his work? And he did a huge study comparing survivors of the Holocaust with survivors of the atomic bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and that dialogue with learning about them separately and then comparing them and dialoguing, having that conversation between them.
The only thing I want to say here is that Boder openly disagreed with this Freudian interpretation of trauma. When he writes about trauma, he writes not about some gap in consciousness. He writes about just direct suffering, some hunger, or for him trauma. Although he invited someone to analyze his testimonies from Freudian perspective, but for him it's not Freudian trauma.
Okay, I understand.
But no, I've never heard about this book. I would later come up to you and ask for the name of the author.
So in that sense, like if you look at the work, let's say by Primo Levi, and Is This a Man? I mean, that work is so basic but about just hunger, or it's so raw. It's almost like it's a testimony. It's written, but it's at that level of just kind of raw feeling and description of what happened or what was happening while he was living that experience. So he's more along those lines.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But here, although Boder used to write poems when he was younger and used to teach literature, but here he sees it as literature, but at this point his identity is of a psychiatrist. So it's mostly about like studying the change of personality from psychological perspective.
So I mean, he is interested in the change of the personality. So psychology, like personality psychology, not moving away from anything that would be psychoanalytic.
Yes. he never was.
At all. That's interesting. But what about in the sense of, let's say, Kristeva with the semiotique, where in language, so you have this this spoken testimony, you hear something, it does something to you. So there is your body feels it. Does he, the person who hears the recording, the way the word is spoken has an effect on the listener. Does he talk about that at all?
No, he doesn't.
Does not.
It all happened in 1949, much like 50 years
Right.
before.
But that's why I think he's still a precursor. I think his work must be so fascinating. I want to read his work like today. It sounds really fascinating.